It's happening, and even if you don't yet have words for it, you can feel it moving beneath the surface of your life. Something subtle but undeniable. A quiet rearranging. A pressure that doesn't feel like stress, and a stillness that doesn't feel like rest. This isn't confusion. This is transition. And the reason this moment feels so different from everything you've lived before is because it is. The universe has already made a choice about you. Not recently, not impulsively. This choice has been forming over time, slowly, patiently, through every delay, every ending, every period where nothing seemed to move no matter how hard you tried. What you're experiencing now isn't a random phase or another spiritual curiosity. You are stepping onto a powerful spiritual awakening timeline, and it's happening because you are finally ready to walk it consciously. There was a time when drifting made sense, when uncertainty protected you, when not knowing who you were or where you were going kept you safe from responsibilities you couldn't yet carry. The universe allows that stage for a reason. It gives space. It gives softness. It gives fog. But fog is never permanent. Fog is a holding pattern, and at some point, when the soul matures enough, the fog has to lift. That's when things start to feel uncomfortable, not because something is wrong, but because clarity is approaching. And clarity always feels exposing before it feels empowering. You may have noticed recently that the old ways of coping don't work anymore. Distractions don't soothe you the way they used to. Avoidance feels heavier than action. Even rest feels different, like you're pausing between movements instead of hiding from life. This isn't because you're losing your sense of peace. It's because peace is changing form. You're no longer meant to find comfort in staying small, quiet, or undefined. You're being prepared for alignment. And alignment requires presence. It requires participation. It requires a version of you that doesn't dissolve into the background of their own life. When the universe chooses someone for a spiritual awakening timeline, it doesn't announce it with fireworks. It doesn't shout. It doesn't force belief. Instead, it starts removing exits. The doors that once allowed you to retreat quietly begin to close, not as punishment, not as pressure, but as protection. Because you've reached a stage where retreat would cost you more than movement ever could. And the universe will never push someone forward unless it knows they can carry the momentum. This is why things that once felt optional now feel necessary, why clarity feels urgent, why direction feels unavoidable. You're not being rushed, you're being activated. There's a difference. Rushing creates anxiety. Activation creates focus. And focus is what's forming inside you now. Not the frantic kind, but the grounded kind. The kind that makes you aware that your choices matter more than they used to. That your presence carries weight. That what you say, decide, and commit to now ripples outward in ways it didn't before. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of spiritual awakening. People expect awakening to feel gentle, blissful, and peaceful. But true awakening often begins with discomfort, with restlessness, with a sense that life is asking more of you without yet explaining why. That's because awakening isn't about escaping the world. It's about stepping into it fully, without filters, without fog, without excuses. You're not being called to observe life anymore. You're being called to shape it. You may look back over the last few years and realize something important. The hardest moments weren't random. The pressure didn't arrive evenly. The challenges came in waves, often right when you were on the edge of growth. Relationships ended when they no longer matched who you were becoming. Opportunities stalled when you were still defining your direction. Silence appeared when you needed to hear your own voice instead of the world's. None of that was accidental. You weren't being delayed, you were being refined. The universe doesn't activate potential lightly. It tests quietly. It watches how someone moves when there are no guarantees, how they respond when clarity is missing, how they treat themselves when validation disappears. And you passed those tests, not by being perfect, but by continuing, by staying curious, by not closing your heart, even when life gave you reasons to. That willingness to move without certainty is rare, and that is what placed you on this timeline. Being chosen for a spiritual awakening timeline doesn't mean life becomes easier. It means life becomes honest. You're no longer protected by confusion. You're no longer shielded by ambiguity. The universe starts asking you to stand in your truth, even when it feels vulnerable, even when it feels exposed. If you've made it this far, don't forget to subscribe for daily cosmic insights, astrology updates, and spiritual guidance, because the universe always has a message for you. Even when it means letting go of versions of yourself that once kept you safe. That's why this phase can feel intense. You're meeting your life directly now, without emotional buffering. You might feel like your identity is shifting, like the old labels don't fit anymore, like the things you once wanted no longer excite you, but the things that do excite you don't yet have names. This is normal. Awakening doesn't give you instant answers. It gives you better questions. It pulls you out of autopilot and into awareness. And awareness can feel destabilizing at first because you're no longer sleepwalking through your own existence. What's important to understand is that nothing is wrong with you for feeling unsettled. This discomfort isn't misalignment. It's momentum. It's the sensation of energy finally moving after a long period of internal preparation. Growth rarely feels good at the beginning. It feels accurate. It feels like life is sharpening instead of softening. And that sharpening is necessary because you're being prepared to act with intention instead of reaction. The universe doesn't place someone on a powerful spiritual awakening timeline to watch them hesitate forever. But it also doesn't punish hesitation. There is no fear here, no threat, no countdown. Momentum is being offered, not forced. You can walk with it or resist it, but either way, the opportunity remains. What changes is how alive you feel inside yourself. When momentum flows, life feels meaningful even in uncertainty. When it's resisted, life feels quiet, safe, and strangely empty. And that emptiness is what many people mistake for peace. But peace that comes from stagnation is fragile. True peace comes from alignment, from knowing you're moving in a direction that reflects who you are becoming. And that's what's being asked of you now. Not to leap, not to transform overnight, just to stay awake. To recognize that this moment matters. To stop telling yourself that nothing is changing when everything is. The universe never removes a path. It removes the illusion that you have infinite time to walk it. That's why this moment feels significant. Not dramatic, significant. Something in your life is ready to accelerate, and awareness is what keeps that acceleration gentle instead of overwhelming. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need certainty. You only need to stop pretending that you're still the person you used to be. One of the most profound signs that someone has entered a spiritual awakening timeline is this. Life begins responding to them differently, not because they demand control, but because their energy has shifted. Their presence influences outcomes. Their decisions create ripple effects. They notice that conversations carry more weight, that endings feel final, that beginnings feel deliberate. This isn't ego, this is alignment. It's what happens when someone's inner world starts matching the direction of their outer life. You weren't chosen because you were fearless. You were chosen because you moved anyway, because you acted when clarity was incomplete, because you trusted instinct over reassurance. The universe doesn't bet on perfection, it bets on participation. And you've shown again and again that even when you doubted yourself, you didn't stop listening. You didn't shut down. You didn't disappear completely. That resilience is what made you ready for this stage. This timeline isn't about receiving signs endlessly. It's about embodiment, about becoming someone whose actions reflect their awareness. You're not here to decode life forever. You're here to live it consciously, to make choices that align with your truth even when they're uncomfortable. To step into responsibility without seeing it as a burden. Responsibility at this level isn't heavy. It's stabilizing. It gives your life shape. If this message reached you in a quiet moment, there's a reason. Some shifts are too personal to be processed through noise, too delicate to survive other people's projections. Solitude isn't isolation right now. It's calibration. It's the space where your intuition can speak clearly without interruption, where you can feel what's rising without immediately explaining it away. That inner recognition you feel isn't imagination, it's memory, a remembering of who you are when you're not performing for the world. You don't need to rush this. You don't need to announce anything. You don't need to prove your awakening to anyone. Just keep walking with awareness. Let clarity form naturally. Let courage show up in small decisions. Let life rearrange itself without resistance. You are not late. You are not behind. You are arriving at the exact moment when awareness meets readiness. This is what it means when we say the universe chose you. Not that you were elevated above others, but that you were trusted with momentum, trusted with movement, trusted with becoming. And that trust wasn't given lightly. It was earned quietly, through endurance, honesty, and a willingness to keep going even when the path disappeared. What comes next doesn't need to be forced. It will recognize you. And when it does, you'll understand why this moment had to happen exactly the way it did, why the delays were necessary, why the confusion had a purpose, why the fog had to lift slowly instead of all at once. You're not stepping into something random. You're stepping into something that's been waiting for you to be fully present. And now you are. Why your life feels uncomfortable right now, and why that's a sign. If you've been wondering why life feels strangely tight lately, like the walls are slowly closing in around your old habits, there's a reason. When someone enters a powerful spiritual awakening timeline, the universe doesn't expand their outer world immediately. It contracts it first. It removes excess. It narrows focus. It takes away the emotional padding that once made misalignment tolerable. This is why things that used to feel neutral now feel unbearable. It's not because you've become sensitive, it's because you've become precise. You may notice that you can no longer lie to yourself comfortably. Excuses feel hollow. Rationalizations fall apart quickly. Even small compromises leave a lingering sense of dissatisfaction. That's not guilt. That's integrity waking up. Your inner compass is recalibrating, and once that happens, there's no going back to unconscious agreement with situations that drain you. Comfort zones don't disappear overnight, but they lose their power. They stop feeling like refuge and start feeling like cages. This stage often feels lonely, not because you're alone, but because you're outgrowing resonance. Conversations feel repetitive. Social spaces feel noisy. Certain relationships feel strangely distant, even when nothing has changed on the surface. You're not becoming disconnected. You're becoming selective, and selectivity is a natural response when awareness deepens. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you now understand about yourself. The universe creates this discomfort deliberately. Growth doesn't happen in wide-open comfort. It happens when the soul realizes it can no longer shrink without pain. This is the point where many people try to retreat. They look for distractions. They numb. They busy themselves. They tell themselves this phase will pass, and it will pass, but only if it's honored. Ignoring it doesn't bring relief. It brings stagnation. What's happening now is not chaos. It's compression. Your energy is being concentrated. The universe is pulling scattered pieces of you back into one place. That pressure you feel is not life pushing against you. It's life pushing through you. Something essential is forming, and formation always feels tight before it feels strong. You might feel like you're standing at an invisible threshold, not fully in the past, not yet in the future. This in-between space can feel disorienting because the old reference points no longer apply. But this is where alignment actually happens. This is where intention replaces impulse, where choice replaces reaction, where you begin to move from awareness instead of habit. The discomfort you're feeling isn't asking you to escape, it's asking you to listen, to notice where you're resisting growth because it feels unfamiliar, to recognize that safety and stagnation often wear the same mask, and to trust that clarity, even when it feels sharp, is kinder than comfort that keeps you small. This phase doesn't last forever, but it is necessary. It's the moment where your life sheds its excess weight so it can move faster later. And once this pressure breaks, you won't recognize the version of yourself that tolerated so much confusion for so long. You're not falling apart. You're coming into focus. What changes when you accept this awakening timeline? The moment you stop resisting this awakening timeline, something subtle but powerful shifts. Life doesn't suddenly become perfect. Problems don't vanish. But the way you meet everything changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this shaping me into?" That single shift alters your entire relationship with experience. When you accept this timeline, momentum begins to feel supportive instead of overwhelming. Decisions that once felt impossible become obvious. Not easy, but clear. You stop needing external validation to move forward because your internal alignment becomes louder than outside opinions. This is one of the quiet miracles of awakening. You no longer need permission to trust yourself. You may notice that life responds faster now. Thoughts turn into opportunities more quickly. Delays shorten. Synchronicities increase. Not because you're being rewarded, but because resistance has dropped. Energy flows where attention goes, and your attention is no longer scattered across fear, doubt, and hesitation. It's focused, and focus is power. Accepting this timeline doesn't mean forcing action, it means allowing direction. You begin choosing from clarity instead of anxiety. You walk away from situations that drain you without over-explaining. You step toward opportunities without needing every detail guaranteed. This is not recklessness. It's trust rooted in experience. You've lived enough to know that waiting for certainty often costs more than moving with intuition. As you settle into this alignment, your sense of identity stabilizes. You stop defining yourself by past struggles. You stop narrating your life through old wounds. Your story becomes less about what hurt you and more about what you're building. This doesn't erase pain, it integrates it. Your experiences stop feeling random and start feeling formative. You may also notice that people respond to you differently. Some are drawn in, others drift away. This is natural. Awakening changes your energetic signature. You're no longer broadcasting confusion, you're broadcasting clarity and formation. Not everyone is comfortable around that, and that's okay. Alignment doesn't require agreement. Perhaps the most important change is this. You stop feeling like life is something happening to you. You feel like a participant again, not in control of everything, but engaged, present, willing. This is where spiritual awakening becomes practical, where insight turns into embodiment, where awareness turns into action without force. You begin to understand that this timeline wasn't given to you to make you special. It was given to you to make you responsible for your own becoming, to live deliberately, to choose consciously, to show up even when the path isn't fully lit. And that responsibility doesn't feel heavy anymore. It feels grounding. Nothing about this awakening requires urgency. There's no race, no comparison, no finish line. You're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where awareness and readiness meet. And from this place, life unfolds with far less resistance. This is what happens when you accept that the universe chose you not for comfort, but for movement, not for safety, but for truth, not for ease, but for alignment. And once you step into that understanding, nothing about your life feels accidental anymore.